Cloudcast Media.
Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media, and we are pleased to have one of our frequent guests back on the show, Jose Cruz. He's the president and CEO of the San Diego Council on Literacy. How you doing there, Jose?
Great. How are you, Drew?
I'm doing great.
Wonderful.
Joined by my business partner and colleague, Charles Parisi, the founder and CEO of Cloudcast Media, because he's going to chat a little bit about the program, the podcast we've been doing with Jose called The Gap Minders. How you doing there, Charles?
I'm doing fantastic. Another Friday morning, Connectivity Capital. Good things happening.
It is good things happening. Had a great lineup so far in our spotlight shows. Jose, they start with you, just for those very few of our spotlight listeners who have not heard you before. What's the mission of the Council on Literacy? How long have you been doing this?
Ooh, boy, let's see. We go back to, I was there when the council was being formed in 1986
That's
and
right.
started with the council in 88.
Right.
And here we are 36 years later.
Yeah.
Mission is to unite the community to support literacy, and then we reinforce that with partnerships and advocacy and resources.
Right. And you have how many literacy providers now?
It's now 33 affiliated programs, a couple of more coming on shortly.
And that is a growth. And you tended to, so, the San Diego Library, is Oceanside Library still involved?
They are, yeah.
Carlsbad,
Yeah.
And not just libraries. There are other groups involved as well.
Big adult basic education systems, nonprofit organizations. It's a real good mix all over San Diego County.
Right.
Yeah. Annually, they're serving 100,000 residents of all ages and at no cost.
Right, exactly. So, Charles, you met Jose through my relationship with him for 1 billion years ago, and you had a light bulb, as you do in many things, to say, we need to get Jose on a show. You've teamed him up with Nancy Sasaki, the president and CEO of United Way, and who came up with the idea, Gap Minders?
Well, I think, first of all, it was collaborative. And I think it was all structured around this thing called gaps. There are so many gaps in this country, whether it's food insecurity, literacy, science, history, technology, where we have more gaps than we probably care to really acknowledge. But that's what it's all about. So the question is, how do we mine those gaps? How do we close those gaps? How do we work collaboratively to try to lift folks that are struggling with some of those gaps?
Right, exactly. So the show launched when, Charles?
Oh gosh, it's 2022 now.
I think so, yeah.
2022. We've there's been 125 episodes, I believe.
Yeah. So, 125. I think I was on one of them, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah. You were one of the early ones.
I think I was one of the early ones on it. And Jose, what has it done for you being on doing the Gap Minders?
Well, one of the things that happened, not just gaps. Certainly sometimes purely gaps, and sometimes gaps in the role of literacy or illiteracy as they contribute to some of the social issues out there. And so that's helpful to us. I think we can always find a way to tie literacy or illiteracy to some of the issues that are out there. So yeah, it's been one of those things that has brought people into that conversation with us, as well as looking at how greater literacy will contribute to solving some of our community challenges.
Yeah, I might add to that, because
please.
he mentioned the key word, conversations. Hey, listen, all of collaboration begins with a conversation, and they're catalytic. If you bring the right people together with the right, and their hearts and minds in the right place, conversations lead to collaboration, which can be a catalyst for a new idea, a new solution. A bell goes off. And for me, that's why I love the Gap Minders being part of Cloudcast, is the conversations that are taking place, the follow-up that happens outside of studio, and the ability to say, hey, what can we do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Charles, I'm going to give you the honor of introducing a brand new co-host, at least for today, someone who's near and dear to your heart. Okay.
Oh my gosh! Actually, here in a studio here, Drew, that was nice of you to wave him in because he's studying the field of acting. But welcome to the show, Alfredo Melita.
Oh, I feel honored to be here.
Who happens to be my nephew, and
That is true.
and so listen, just I think Drew's going to tell you, just kind of jump in when you feel like you have a question.
Well, listen, I think it's great on, interested in theater and so forth. So, literacy is pretty important to you, is it not, Alfredo?
Oh, it's very important.
Yeah. So were you, and then Jose, you can jump on this because we talk about it all the time. And your uncle, of course, what I love about, Charles is he loves science. He's a biotech guy, he's a biocom guy. But he says, first and foremost, you can't read, you can't be literate, ball game over. Okay. Were you a reader when you were younger? Did you read a lot?
I did read a lot when I was younger.
Okay. And so did it help you, because I'm reading a lot, I'm listening a lot, to get you into this theater field because of that?
I kind of took a break from reading when I entered high school. Before that, I used to read a book a week, and it does help to read more. So that's something I've been trying to get back to a lot, at least a book a week, acting books, other books, just reading stories. You never know what's out there to learn. So.
Alfredo, he's followed very closely that pattern. I think that, by the way, that's not uncommon. I think in the high school years, Drew and Alfredo and Jose, like my daughter, didn't do a lot of reading and had read a lot when she was younger. Didn't read a lot in high school. Now this year she's going to knock out about 50 books.
Wow!
While she was in law school, while now practicing law, and I think you get it back because I think reading, and again this is why I love working with Jose, who is, by the way, the hardest working man in literacy. I don't know if you knew he had that title, but that is in fact.
I've known because I've known Jose for 38 years.
But he now brands himself as the hardest working man in literacy.
Is that right?
Charles did this.
Yeah, of course. Is it on your business card now, Jose?
No, I'm thinking about adding it.
Well, Drew, I like to talk about marketing and branding and things that stand out. The hardest working man in literacy is what I think Jose will.
Thank you.
They will laugh. First of all, it's true. People will laugh when they hear it, and they're actually going to remember it.
Yeah.
But I think it's so important that everyone, young people in particular, find their way back to books.
Yeah.
And I realize Kindle and the technology is wonderful. And I'm going to even say, find your way back to tangible books and disconnect from technology and give yourself the time and space to dream, to relax, to change the frequency of your brain waves, and then travel wherever the book takes you to.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no question about it. We're chatting with Jose Cruz. He's the president and CEO of the San Diego Council on Literacy, joined by Charles Parisi. He's the founder and CEO of Cloudcast Media, and Alfredo Melita. He is going to be a burgeoning superstar in the theater arts and an actor. And I'm Drew Schlosberg. Listen to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight in the Community Show, nation's longest running community podcast, brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union. 6 decades of doing great things in San Diego County. Jose, as you continue this unbelievable journey, do you find that there are more people reading books because there's more access to books, less people reading books? You have a strong relationship. You and I have talked about this before.
Yeah.
How many books have you distributed to kids over the last several years?
I mean, and that's one of the big positives. Since COVID, we've given out over 400,000 brand new books for children in San Diego County. It's over $4 million worth of books.
Right.
And so in that regard, when you first started framing your question, I'm thinking, reading books is down. I think we know that a little bit, but I also understand that there's a comeback taking place. We still have bookstores and libraries, and they're all busy. Right. And I think the more that we make books accessible, especially to populations that are on the fringes out there, the more likely they are to read. So it's hard to answer that question because there's a lot of great things happening, more access, and then there's so many distractions in today's world. I mean, everything's about entertainment. how many times do we pick our cell phones up and then people are streaming and watching TV and entertainment. So there's more probably in the history of humanity that we have all of these. All this access to entertainment. And so, books are going to take a hit. But I do get this sense that we're, as a society, coming back to that. and valuing it more. And I mean, knowledge in this day and age is priceless. We need more people to have compassion and learn compassion and travel and be knowledgeable about other people through reading and other outlets. And so it just enhances quality of life for all.
Right. Charles, you were mentioning that the Gapminders, you may be doing a different change to format at all?
Yeah, well, here's what Jose and I and the team have been chatting about, because here's the reality. We have major challenges in this country with literacy and reading proficiency, and it's unacceptable. I know your prior guest was Dave Oates, a phenomenal national PR superstar when it comes to crisis PR. We should hire Dave because we have a crisis on our hands. And it's a crisis in reading. And but it's also symptomatic. When a young person or a young household is not a reading household, there's quite a few other things that are happening in that household that we ought to be paying attention to. So these gaps exist in a variety of ways. So what we're going to really do with this new season of Gapminders is really broaden the aperture a little bit and dig into many more gaps that we ought to be talking about in this country. Whether Jose and I had a cool conversation last Sunday about this thing called history gaps, and a different reflection and perhaps storytelling with respect to history and how we can better shape history, food, poverty, educational gaps, technology gaps. So we're gonna kind of open it up a little bit and talk about gaps on a much broader basis. And I might also add, Drew, this is originally 2 years in the makings, but now we're going to officially kind of connect it and tie it out. As you know, I care deeply about youth getting involved in causes. Don't care what your cause might be, but there's something in the community you can address. So we're launching something in the youth social responsibility space called Gaptivism, that I am a Gaptivist. With my talents, my skills, my passion, I can change something right in my community. And so Gaptivism, the Gapminders, it's all now coming together in the new season.
Yeah, very, very exciting. We're going to look forward to hearing that. I think, one of the things we were talking about, you mentioned about the history gap, and I'll ask Alfredo this. Because you're a little bit younger than us, by about 7 decades, but not quite 7 decades. But in that aspect of it, I think it's important for people to really realize how important history is. And old adage, if you don't know history, you can repeat the mistakes before. For you, at your young age, how important is for the history of theater, for example, or acting, or learn from these things, or just history in general? Or is it not that important?
I think it's always important to know history in relation to everything. If you don't know your history, then it's bound to repeat itself, but for better or for worse. So it's good to know why stuff came about, where it came about. So just keeping up with that. And I think with like social media and stuff like that, young kids are learning stuff at an early age. They're being exposed to these things. So I think it's good to expose them to good things. Like with the history Gaptivism, that could be like a good thing where you teach them about these values at an earlier age because they're catching on.
And you, Alfredo, I love what you're talking about. I think the other thing that's important for young people, middle-aged people, and old people is to open up their own minds in terms of how they're consuming history telling. So I'm going to say something that, Jose, you may not agree with, or Drew, you may not agree with, Alfredo. When it comes to humans, there's no such thing as an absolute truth. Mm-hmm. There's only their truth and how they want to tell their story of what happened. And I share this, Alfredo, with you. One time I asked a friend of mine who was from England, his name's Malcolm, hey, so how do they teach the 4th of July over in England? And he looked at me with a puzzled look and said, well, why would we teach that? We didn't care about it. My point is, from the UK's perspective, perhaps that never happened, but it did happen. So we all ought to be thinking about history and the lens through which it's told to better understand what actually happened versus perhaps what we think happened based on our own sometimes limited sources. Those are the things we want to talk about.
Well, I think it's critical. When we come back from break, we want to continue that conversation on history. As you know, and Charles knows this, and Jose Alfredo probably doesn't, that, my background in journalism, it's very important to try to get at least the facts out, and which is a historical record of what had happened, at least at this time. And I think it's important for people to try to go back a little bit. Charles, you and I have talked about civics, incessantly. And, I think you talk about a gap. There's a huge gap, Grand Canyon-like gap when it comes to that. Maybe that's something we can address when we return with Jose Cruz. He is the president and CEO of the San Diego Council on Literacy, joined by my colleague and the president and CEO and founder of Cloudcast Media, Charles Parisi, joined by Alfredo Melita. Going to be a burgeoning actor, going to be back in the theater arts, and we continue this conversation on Gap and the Gap Minders. We will be right back.
When you do your banking with Mission Fed, you get great rates on auto and home loans. That's good for you, but something good also happens for a lot of other people. We're not for profit, so we put money back into the community to help lots of great nonprofits to keep San Diego strong. So you're not just getting something good, you're doing something good. Come to Mission Fed. It's banking that's good for all.
Brand amplification is the DNA of Cloudcast Media, and our code is the powerful blending of sound, voice, and storytelling to lift local brands and their communities. Whether it is our Brandcast, Schoolcast, or Causecast platforms, the unifying ethos is all about this community, the one you call home. If you dare to dream and want to explore the brand amplification of Cloudcast, a national leader in local podcasting and other Winfluence strategies, please visit us at cloudcast.us.
I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media, and you are listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, the nation's longest-running community podcast, now in our 20th year, brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, 6 decades of just doing phenomenal work in San Diego County, from food insecurity to literacy to pick a topic. They're heavily involved in it. Honored to have in the studio my longtime friend and colleague, Jose Cruz, president and CEO of the San Diego Council on Literacy, and my business partner, Charles Parisi, the founder and CEO of Cloudcast Media, joined by Alfredo Melita. He is a burgeoning, upcoming actor. We'd love to get his take on, we talked about a little about literacy, a little about history. We'll talk about more about some of these gaps. And, we sort of left before break, Charles, talking about the gap in civics and all that business. Why is that so important?
Well, listen, to me, there's no democracy without, in my humble opinion, civil conversations and the willingness to embrace another point of view, which may not be your own. In fact, I always think if someone has an alternate point of view, it should give you an opportunity to dig in a little bit deeper to where you might be, and either, hey, I'm staying where I am, or I may move a little bit. That you moved me, you persuaded me that I need to think of things differently. So I think it's essential. If we don't learn how to converse, collaborate, listen well, accept that other people have different positions in this thing called the democracy, we're going to have some challenges. That's why even debate casts, which you and I have chatted about.
That's right.
I think, we want to bring back we want to create the first ever debate podcast with high school students that are debating live on a podcast.
I just had a conversation with someone, and they wanted to talk to me about something I said, and they used the word adamant about their position. And I looked that word up, and that word told me not to get into a conversation with this person. There's no room. You used the wrong word.
Right.
Right. And back to your point, Charles, truth actually being something that works in context. 2,500 years ago, Plato talked about things that should be human priorities. And we're still having that conversation, And so how much have things changed? How much have things stayed the same? And what helps us to have context is having information. Some of it's oral, and a lot of it is printed. There's no movies from the year 1000, and so we have certain sources of information, reading books, etc., that provide us with background so that we can have a context, because context is everything. And the bigger context you have, the more that you can have conversations about all the things that have happened, or a lot of things that have happened over a period of time that affect what we do today, or don't. If we still think we're living in 2000 to 2024, we're missing a whole lot. And sometimes we just don't look beyond where we are. And God, there's so much value in knowing history.
Yeah, no question about it.
Yeah, you know what I find interesting on this, I'd love to get Alfredo's, take on this. Charles, we talk about this almost incessantly, especially when we have our theater art groups on. And thank you, folks like Susan Kloss and so forth. And, because, we're a big fan, I know you are too, Charles, on, what that message in theater groups are. And that is having a little more empathy in this world, which went by the way of the dodo bird, for God's sake. Talk about how important that is to you. Alfredo, as being in the theater arts, becoming an actor, and so forth. How important is empathy?
Empathy is very important. I did a play out in Arizona, and before the play, we sat down and we had a collaborative talk about what we want our play to represent and the values we bring and touch on. And lots of it was like racism, sexism, things like that. And I think theater is beautiful because it tells a story, and then you're able to feel things and have that visceral reaction to what you're hearing and taking in. And that's why I love theater. You're able to make people feel, and sometimes that's empathy, and you feel the empathy. And
it's interesting too, because he used the word Drew and Jose, feelings, because so many actors I've heard say, as much as they may enjoy a movie, there's nothing like live theater and performing in front of an audience.
There isn't. Because
you can't get the feeling about in filmed entertainment.
That's right.
You can't get that same human connection.
Right. There's no question about it. And it's everything with it here. I'm talking like I know what I'm talking about, which I don't. And I think Alfredo he's only met me for 2 hours. He'd probably say, yeah, you're right. He doesn't. But that all said, when you go and see these live performances and the people we talk to, Charles, we've met a lot of producers and a lot of actors, on our podcast show and this aspect of it. But when you see live theater, it's the sounds, it's the thoughts, it's the body movements, it's the smells, it's the everything that goes with it that makes that whole experience. Am I right or wrong, Alfredo?
No, you're right. The senses are very important. Sense memory is a big thing in acting, where you could have a reaction to something just based off remembering a smell you had at the time. And yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, as you guys are looking at Gapminders 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever you're talking about in this, do you look at having different types of guests on the show? I'll start with you on that, Jose, and then pivot over to Charles.
Yes, we'd love to have, and I don't think we've had very many repeat guests. I can't actually think of one.
Yeah.
So that's and there are a lot of people out there, and I think where we have succeeded is we aim high.
Right.
And not a whole lot of people tell us no. Okay, Dolly Parton said no.
Right, exactly.
She's international director.
Right.
She did say no, right?
Yeah, well, she Dolly, Dolly knows us.
But
and that's a good thing.
Remember, Jose, no is when the sales
That's when negotiation starts. Yes. Yeah. So we're not done. And and so more of that, more diverse perspectives, more young people, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, if we can get
do you have theater people on?
No, we haven't, and we will.
Oh, good. Well, Alfredo's going to be your first guest.
Yeah, I'd love to have that. And I just want to make a point: is that Alfredo is reading. He brought a book to the studio. He's here reading.
I know, it's great.
My first memory is going to be who's this guy sitting here reading a book right now.
Well, listen. When he wins his first Tony, you're going to, even way before that.
I'll be
there. Exactly. Yeah. No, in theory, in all seriousness, I think it's really important to talk about that. The gap gaps are important. I'm assuming Nancy Sasaki is going to continue on as a co-host. Is that, or we're not quite sure?
Well, I don't know that Nancy will still do every episode for the year because she's got some major initiatives with the United Way.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're anticipating that Nancy will, anytime she wants to fly that plane with Jose, she's going to be able to fly that airplane. It's going to be a function of her schedule because Nancy and Jose had some fantastic chemistry. United Way is unbelievable in all the work they do in San Diego County. And I'll tell you, for them having been involved, and again, those catalytic moments when you put something into the universe and it creates a big bang moment, it's incredible. So now the key is, how do we broaden it out? And again, like Jose, for example, like the two gaps that I care so much about, and Drew, you know this, is why I love spending as much time as possible with school superintendents, Classroom of the Future Foundation. Hey, when all is said and done, because you almost have to do a systems engineering perspective because there's so many problems and challenges. And I go back to education. I think fixing education 100%. In America fixes almost every single gap.
100%.
It takes care, because then you have social and economic mobility. You can afford health care. You're not dealing with poverty and housing challenges. And so to me, that's what I'm going to love to spend a lot of time talking about on the Gap Minders. Not personally, because I'm not going to be on the show, but as a organization, we've got to figure this out.
Well, I don't want to jump on that point because you know how I feel about that 100% with you in this area. And, you know, as Brandon Joe knows, associate producer, and then Kristen Fogel couldn't be with us today. There's probably not an episode that, or a time that we've done our Spotlight show that we don't talk about mental health. We know we're in a mental health crisis in this country, to say the least. A lot of it due to, the pressures that people feel because they're not as educated as they'd like to be, or literacy in that aspect. Alfredo, certainly theater is a release, right? Talk about the challenges with mental health. And there's a crisis in here, but it seems like when you go watch a live theater play, that just goes away.
Yeah, that's the great thing. I was talking to Brandon earlier. I said lots of people do theater because they want to be something else or something like that, but I like it because you get to be yourself more. You get to express yourself and just get away from everything else. The lights are on you. You can't really see the people in the audience, or maybe you could. And it's just everything else goes away, but you're just in that moment. And that's big, especially mental health. It's hard, You ask yourself lots of questions, lots of doubt, but you just got to push through it. And
I think some of the things, Charles, I know that's really important to you when you talk about this. And we had the wonderful Dr. Angela Bass on earlier talking about voice. That is, you can't talk to Charles Parisi for more than 5 seconds, not talk about youth voice. And how does the Gap Minders deal with that? I'll start with you, Charles, and you can answer.
Yeah, I'll tell you, when we went back into the lab, okay, what's this next season going to be about? We spent a lot of talking about, hey, because this isn't our world. Drew, newsflash to you and Jose. This is not our world. We're just basically trying to hold back the tsunami so this next generation can get ready to fix the amazing number of challenges we've left them.
Right.
And so I tease young people like Brandon and Alfredo that you should thank us because you're going to be the greatest problem-solving generation in American history.
You have to be.
Because we left you a whole mountain of problems. So the key here is how can we have a show called Gap Minders and not embrace the youth perspective on gaps that they see, that they're feeling, they're experiencing, how they might go about solving them. What would they do? Because I kid you not, you heard me say this yesterday on a Zoom committee meeting.
Right.
We hire youth on every show with Cloudcast, Brandon being an example. And some people say, well, that's really nice you're hiring them. I says, no.
It benefits us.
Cloudcast is way better off for having captured the youth energy, the youth insights, the technology proficiency, everything. We're better for having brought youth into our business. And we've got to do that on our shows.
Yeah. And there's a perspective that we're not going to get from the audience closest to us, our generation. I think back to Brendan O'Neill, his mother, adult learner, putting him on one of these shows, and it was like, man, this guy's never done a podcast, never been interviewed in his whole life, and he brought it. He brought it. What we could be doing to fix the education system, his experience and stuff. I don't have that, and I don't have today's perspective. I don't have his perspective, so you can't get that anywhere else. So Charles is right,
and I think I'm really looking forward to exploring education, because here's what I keep coming back to. Jose and Drew and Alfredo, you might have a thought on this, is that if you think of the world between analog and digital, and then there was the hybrid generation where so go back to the 40s and 50s, completely, totally, 60s, completely, totally analog humans. There were no digital instruments. You had a TV, you had a radio. It doesn't qualify as digital. Now we have young students today, 5, 6 years old, where digital devices are literally an appendage. Okay? So one of the things I think we need to be talking about is we're still trying to drive analog educational concepts into almost like a new species of human that's completely digital, and it's not going to work.
Yeah.
That's why I loved hearing Dr. Angela Bass earlier talk about it's not necessarily even the content, it's the engagement of the student with the content. His math is math. Okay. No, we're not going to argue 1 + 1 is 2, and it always has been, and it probably always will be, to my knowledge. But the key is, how do you engage this digital learner to get it behind 1 + 1 is 2, or whatever you might be teaching? So the exploring, because and some of us in the analog or the hybrid where we crossed over, computers were just coming out in the early 80s, that we've got to convince ourselves that we have a completely type of new learner, and the same old stuff isn't likely to work.
No, there's no question about it. Well, Jose Cruz, always good to see you in the studio. Wishing you nothing but great success with the Council on Literacy. I know you got a big event coming up in December, some literacy champions and so forth. Looking forward to seeing Gapminders 2.0. Charles, I always appreciate your insights. And Alfredo Melito, what a pleasure chatting with you. This will not be the last time that we'll have you on when you're coming back visiting us, and you've already done some great theater work up in Los Angeles. We want to get your perspective on how things have been going. How's that sound?
Glad to be here. I'll be here again.
Very good.
As long as you'll have me.
You consider that a done deal. I'm Drew Schlosberg, and you've been listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, the nation's longest-running community podcast. Now in our 18th year, brought to you by the amazing folks at Mission Fed Credit Union. 6 decades of doing great things for people living in San Diego County. We hope you enjoyed the interview.
You've been listening to an episode of Drew Schlosberg's Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego community. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
Cloudcast Media.